Why do people like you? Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I am an author, robot, reader, and that's why we're here. Today, we're going to talk about the ever popular anti-hero. What makes an anti-hero? How do you get your readers on the side of an anti-hero, especially when they're particularly ruthless? The protagonist, just so you know, does not automatically mean good guy. So, first, let's get into this by defining what is an anti-hero. An anti-hero is a protagonist who lacks some of the conventional, some or all, of the conventional attributes of a traditional hero. Some would say like courage or morality or selflessness or sacrifice or name a list, love, kindness, just name a list of positive attributes that a typical traditional hero would have, and an anti-hero may not have some of them or may not have any of them. There are two main types of anti-heroes. One anti-hero does the right thing, but may not do it for the right reasons. Maybe they want money, maybe they want fame, maybe they want attention, maybe they want recognition, but they still do the right thing for it. Another type of anti-hero is the kind that does the wrong thing, but their motives are often noble. So we might not like what they're doing, but we can at least go, okay, I understand why you're doing that, and you're not like so if we look at the Marquis de Sade in 120 Days of Sodom, okay, he is not torturing those children for any good reason. He is a straight up villain. However, you can have, there's no good reason for it. He's not punishing anybody evil. He's hurting little innocent children specifically because they're innocent. That is just an evil dude. So there are no noble motives. However, we can look at heroes that go on a journey to defeat the villain because their mother died. So using that as a diving board, we can at least go, your motives are pure because you wanted to avenge your wrongfully killed family member and bring the bad guy to justice, even if justice is your own personal version of justice. But still, same can be said about Batman. This is how Batman is an anti-hero and a vigilante, because his parents were killed, and so he wanted to enforce law and order and vengeance of his own kind on the villains of the city that did this to him, and then he just kind of continued with that. So then the question becomes, what makes an anti-hero specifically different from a traditional hero? Number one is motive. So traditional heroes often have the motive of justice, which is moral righteousness, the law, goodwill on their side, and that's usually what pushes them. Meanwhile, as I kind of said with the descriptions above, an anti-hero is often seeking personal gains of some kind. Revenge, which is personal justice, or vengeance, which is the infliction of harm, humiliation, or the like on a person by another person who has been harmed by that person. Fame, money, power, control, all sorts of, self-serving things. Those are going to be the two main differences between the hero and the anti-hero. Framing becomes a really big part of any story, and especially the story of an anti-hero or a villain as the protagonist, because what you got to do when you're making an anti-hero or a villain as the protagonist, which is an unsavory character as your main character, and you still draw the reader in while they're doing bad things. So framing is going to be excessively important when you're working with a hero or an anti-hero, because if the perspective was changed off of the anti-hero being the main character, then they could easily look like the villain in somebody else's story. Isn't that how we all are, though? So framing typically determines who is a good guy and who is a bad guy, even when somebody is doing bad things. Imagine a story about a kid who just wants to go to college, but he can't afford to. He's downtrodden, out of his luck, all sorts. He finds burgling to be the only thing that he's good at, and maybe that'll get him where he wants to be, and he feels like that's how what he needs to do in order to live. So if we're rooting for the thief, then the homeowner might be seen as the bad guy standing in the way of the protagonist. And so we might be rooting for this thief, but is him being downtrodden enough for us to root for him? It depends on how it's framed. Now let's complicate it a little bit. Imagine the homeowner that he's going to rob specifically is somebody who ruined his life. Maybe sent his father to jail, where his father was then murdered either by an inmate or the death penalty, and the character feels like his life was destroyed because of the homeowner of this building that he's about to rob. And the boy's framing, especially with this kind of backstory where he's like, oh, he was wronged and he's only targeting this person who wronged him first, we're kind of probably rooting for this character. So now, in framing, let's consider the main character was not this boy, but was a girl who lived in a house with her mother, and a house that he was going to burglarize. Her parents were divorced since she was young, and she just started working her first job as a barista when one night this thief breaks into her house and raids all of the jewelry, including her great-grandmother's wedding ring that she was saving for when she got married. Now, this girl's mother is shot and killed defending the house and her daughter from the thief. Because we are introduced to the girl as the protagonist, the framing is different. And so this girl is going to be our protagonist, and we'll be rooting for her to get what she wants. And maybe what she wants is to become to go the hero's route and become a detective or a police officer or a superhero in the future in order to legally stop what happened to her from happening to other people, because maybe this guy got away. Or she could decide that she wants to go the anti-hero route and take justice into her own hands and hunt this guy down and make him suffer the way that she suffered and make him pay outside of the law. So as you can see, the motive is very, very important to defining what an anti-hero is versus a traditional hero, and then also the framing, because depending on if we're looking from the thief's point of view or from the girl's point of view, the other one would be the antagonist in either person's story, because they're standing in each other's way of what the other one wants. The thing that stands out between a hero and an anti-hero is the drive. Now, this might sound familiar. Often, the motive or drive of an anti-hero may be similar to that of a villain, or it may be exactly the same as a villain's journey, which is, I want revenge, these people mistreated me, so I want power over them. Now, the thing that makes a difference, going back to the previous point, the thing that makes a difference in the villain's journey versus the protagonist's journey with an anti-hero is that they are not being framed as a villain, but villainizing someone else who is often worse than them. In fact, this is kind of like the ugly girl syndrome, where you've got a bad guy and then a worse guy standing next to him, so the bad guy doesn't really look so bad. And here are a couple different ways to think of different versions of anti-heroes. Some anti-heroes are extremely cynical, and their drive to do good is often skewed by past dramas or their thirst for vengeance. So they go, well, maybe killing this person isn't that bad, because in order to get to my ultimate goal, which is this thing over here, that person had to go or it couldn't have been done, and I have to avenge this person. So their morals might be skewed because of past traumas, or that, like I said, the thirst for vengeance. They often need to take down somebody that's truly despicable, a villain in their life, somebody that they see worse than themselves, even if they're breaking the law. And they'll often justify their actions as that person had it coming. If that person didn't get in the way, they wouldn't have been killed, because they weren't my target, but they got in the way of me, my target, so they had to go. They were bad by default. And instead of bringing the bad guy to justice with as little blood on their hands as possible, by like going through the channels with the police, investigating, going through the court system, all of that, they become vicious and sometimes enjoy the acts of violence that they deem necessary because it's emotionally good at the time. They might reflect on it later and go, or they might just never care because it feels emotionally good to what they need to fulfill their personal issues. Another type of anti-hero might be very self-centered to a degree and reluctant to accept the role as hero, so they don't want to be there, but they're kind of forced into the role. Another type of anti-hero is somebody who is a reluctant hero. They don't feel the urgency to join in the fight against the villain, and they're really only concerned about themselves, but somehow they still get yanked into it. And another type of anti-hero character would be somebody who is amoral or downright sinister. This leans more on the villain protagonist. So, when dealing with these sinister, especially characters. It's easy enough, I think, to help get people to empathize with reluctant characters or fearful characters or even kind of selfish characters that don't want to get involved, depending on obviously how you write them. But how do you get people to care about the main characters or protagonists who are more sinister or more selfish or willing to do anything in order to accomplish their goals? How do you get the reader on board with, well, this killing was necessary and I don't hate this character because you want to convince the reader that basically this is necessary along with the main character believing this is necessary. These are just tips. Usually anything as writing is just a tip and you can apply it as you see necessary, play with it as you see able to play with it, but I found these very helpful for me to play with and adjust and focus on when I'm editing my characters. Number one thing you can do to help readers connect with your main character is make the character really, really good at something. So anti-heroes should have a skill that is relevant to the story. Don't make them able to speak 7 languages or play 10 instruments unless it's important to the story. Don't make them good at everything in the world that has nothing to do with the plot line. If you make them good at something, it should come up in the story and it should be important to their journey. Now, does your character always have to be good at something? Not necessarily. But it does help the reader connect to them. Number 2, give the character a moral code. So even if the character does do the worst things in the book that you can even imagine, the reader won't hate them if that character has a moral code that they stick to. Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the needy. That's not actually exactly heroic because it's not morally right. He's breaking the law by stealing. However, because he has a moral code, he wouldn't hurt those that he saw as unfortunate or poor and actually set out to give to the poor. We gave him a chance and we called him a hero. He was helping those who he considered unfortunate, which we decided was a moral code, which makes him interesting. Moral code doesn't necessarily mean correct either. It can be a twisted moral code. But if they have a compass and we can see the logic in the way that they live, that makes a character much easier to connect to, even if it's wrong. Another good example of a strong moral code to live by is the old school Italian mobster code, where if a family had a problem with a man from a nuclear traditional family with wife and kids, and they had to pay the piper by taking out the husband, the mobster family who killed the husband would often then pay the widow and her children because they had taken away the husband, because they had taken away the breadwinner, which left the wife and children helpless. And so they decided, we have to take responsibility because we took away your provider. And that is a moral code. And you go, oh, well, you might have murdered somebody because of an internal beef, but I can respect that. Number 3 way to help your readers connect to your protagonist or your characters is to make them vulnerable or arouse sympathy somehow. So flaws can be and should be painful and should have consequences to the characters who have them. Self-doubt is an excellent flaw. But it doesn't matter if every moment of self-doubt doesn't hurt them, if they're reassured or their self-doubt doesn't affect their performance in the moments that it matters. Clumsiness is a flaw that's often associated with the Mary Sue trope because it's so light that it can be seen as cute and get people into awkward romantic situations. But in those cases, it's rarely used to hurt the MC, make them clumsy and break something where it matters and actually hurts them or gets them kicked out of a story or a part of a story where they want to be so they don't actually suffer from their clumsiness. Another one is temper or arrogance. That's an excellent character flaw, but it doesn't really count as a character flaw if there are no consequences, if the people around them don't get mad at them or punch them or kick them out of the club because they're being arrogant, if they don't get hurt because they're getting arrogant, if they don't get hurt because they have a temper and they bashed a wall of metal with their fist and now they can't play piano anymore and piano was their dream. There have to be consequences for something to be a flaw. Without consequences, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter. It's no different than if they were just an all-around good person all the time, because there are no negative effects on their lives. Number 4 way to help your readers connect with your character is to give them fears and feelings we've all experienced. And this is especially helpful for anti-heroes and often pretty much required in an anti-hero because something has made that character more cynical, more selfish, more something. Scared in some cases. So loneliness, rejection, desperation, hopelessness, helplessness. In this the situation of the character going after her own revenge because she doesn't want to go to the law. She might feel helpless by going to the law because they're not helping her. They can't move fast enough. She doesn't feel like the person that killed her whole family is ever going to be brought to justice, so she has to do something herself. All of those feelings I just mentioned are things that everybody has felt, and when you help has felt. And when you show the reader this character being this vulnerable and make that connection of being in that weak spot, the reader is a lot more willing to get on board. The fifth way that it was suggested to me to help your readers connect to your characters is avoid large bundles of backstory before page 30. Getting the story started and the action moving is what turns the page. When people say make them want to turn the page and see what happens next, they don't mean leave it off on a cliffhanger chapter. They mean get the ball rolling to make the action just sweep them off their feet and keep going. When you do backstory, it actually slows down the story and becomes a plateau. So if you start out your story with exposition or backstory, the ball's not moving yet. Maybe I'm a psychopath, but open your story with a backstory of rape and murder before showing me who the character is and what they want, and I'm just going to roll my head back and go, why do I care, though? Why do I care about this? I want to know what the character is doing now, not 5 years ago when they got raped. Sorry, but show me that first. Show me who they are today, and then I'll go, I wonder what made them like this. I've got in my novel Creatures Lie Here, I've got a cannibal who doesn't associate himself as a human anymore because he was traumatized as a child. But you don't get to see why he is the way he is until more than halfway through the book. The introduction to the character and the way their mind works should prompt the reader to go, I wonder what happened to X character to make them like this. And that's when you want to start introducing backstory, not before your person starts asking what made them like this. You have to get the reader to buy into that character before you start introducing backstory, and then we'll care about what happened to them. Anytime before that, and it's like, okay, anybody can write rape at the front of their story, but why should I care that this character was raped? That might sound harsh, but there's no buy-in yet. There's no emotional connection. So what do you do with at-all-cost anti-heroes who will do anything in order to accomplish their goal? Look at what drove people to Joker. They got to see him being down on his luck. They got to see him being hopeless. They got to see him being bullied. They got to see him being desperate before he did anything bad. And so at some point, when you're seeing somebody fall, you kind of just want to see somebody have some kind of success. I've seen people posting about, I'm posting this story because I'm feeling demotivated and I need to just have some kind of success. Get the buy-in from people who are desperate to see somebody have a win. And if you make somebody care about the fall of that character, then at some point they might be hoping to see that character get turned around. And then at some point they might, they want to see them have a win of some kind. Or they want to see them get caught if they get bad enough. They want to know that other people are going to be okay. But that's usually with the villain. If you have a villain protagonist, it's usually stop them. Another more current-ish example is the Last of Us game that PlayStation just released. Well, they have The Last of Us 2 now. But The Last of Us 1, the main characters kill a lot of people. It's a zombie apocalypse, and the main character kills a lot of people, protecting basically a surrogate daughter or an adoptive daughter of his that he picked up during the zombie apocalypse. And that's something that a lot of people can empathize with. You've got a parent figure who lost his biological daughter in this end of the world situation and adopted a new daughter to kind of fill the void and is acting as a father to her. So anybody who can empathize with a parent and loving a sibling, or a parent and loving a child, or a sibling loving a sibling and wanting to care for them, will be able to empathize with this and go, I would do anything to make sure that they are safe, to make sure they are fed. It goes along with,
you know what, I'm ready. My daughters aren't starving to death. I'll eat my neighbors. See, my superpower is being honest. I'll eat your ass. I will.
So then when you get to The Last of Us 2, this daughter character is now killing a bunch of people on a revenge scheme. And is she justified in all of these people that she's killing? Well, if you look at it morally, No, it's very, very bad. But if you look at it from the perspective of, I cared about the person that she's seeking revenge for, so yes, she's totally justified, but we don't really care that she is breaking the law or doing some morally terrible things because we want to have vengeance for that person that we had connected with, right? And so that's really where it comes down to, is you got to make the reader buy in and feel for whatever is happening to start cheering for that character. That will start turning the blind eye to what this character is actually doing because we believe in their goals, we cared about who they cared about, stuff like that. Expressing what is the motivation can be really, really difficult because, you, like I said, you don't want to bog the front of your story down with motivation. You don't need to answer questions before the reader asks them, which can be very tempting to do. I've noticed a lot in what I'm writing that people like to fully explain who a character is before you actually see the character, so that when they make morally ambiguous or morally questionable things, you go, well, okay, but they did go through this thing, so that's fine though. You don't need to do that. Show us who the character is first by their actions, by the way they talk, by their movement, how they carry the story forward, and then you can show us why they've done that when we start going, well, what would make them do this? Another thing, like going back to the Last of Us series, you've got the whole first game, which is one story arc, and then the second game, which is a completely other story arc with a different focus on the main characters, and the actions of the main character, the adoptive daughter, are totally justified from the story arc from the first game. And so you have those that carry over. So bad thing happens at the beginning of, say, book 2, but because we've built this relationship in book 1, the dastardly actions in book 2, we completely just justify, and we're along with, because we agree with this character and their relationships with those around them, right? When it comes to character growth in these types of stories, should there be some kind of change by the end of the story in the ruthless anti-hero type character? Sure, generally there should be something, but does there have to be? No. In every story with every character arc and climax, there should be an opportunity for the character to make the decision to either change or stay the same if you're writing a character-driven work. So, you present them with some sort of opportunity at the beginning of the novel and they make a decision, and then you can see all the trials and tribulations they went through and the sum of those parts at the end when they're presented a new decision and they choose to either change or stay the same. And it can be subtle, it can be very, very loud. Look back at the Joker reference, and this is going to be a spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen it yet, sorry. But up until that very kind of last moment when he gets on the show with Maury, a little bit sooner than that, I think, even. But when he's prepping to go on the show with Maury, he's purchased a gun, and he's practicing his joke of what he's going to say when he gets on Murray, because now he's on Murray, and he's going to shoot himself as the punchline, right? But when he's actually on the show, it changes from shooting himself to shooting his aggressor, to shooting what he calls his aggressor. And we get to see him change from just complete self-pity to, I'm in control of my destiny. Now, he could have still gotten on the show and then shot himself, and we would see that unchanging self-pity, I'm a victim of everything, I don't have any control. But he did get to have that opportunity to make a decision one way or another that shows the sum of the journey of the whole program. And if character development is necessary, which, again, I don't necessarily think character development is necessary, but I think it is important to show that a character is choosing the wrong paths and either choosing to develop worse, which is still getting worse is still character development, mind you. I did a video talking about the villain's journey a couple months ago, which I'll link at the end of this video. But getting worse is still a character journey, but you should always give opportunities for the character to make decisions to be better, to be worse, or to stay the same. And can you do that over a course of a series? Yes, you definitely can. Going back to the Last of Us reference, we have different plot lines in story 1 and story 2, and different decisions are being made, and different scenarios are being brought up. So you go through all of this trauma in book 1 or series 1, And then you get to series 2 and you meet different things. And the character who's in book 2 is not necessarily going to be the same person they were at the beginning of book 1. So just keep in consideration where the mindset is of the person making those decisions. And are they growing? Are they getting worse? Are they getting better? Are they staying exactly the same and just choosing to try the same thing again and again in hopes of getting a different result? Because that will express a certain kind of insanity. You can definitely show the progress of the character throughout the book, but every story should have its own kind of arc within it. They don't have to get to their absolute worst at the beginning of book 1. Every book should kind of leave a trail of breadcrumbs so that when the reader gets to the ultimate climax at the end of the series, they can go, oh, wow, and look back at all of the little decisions that led up to this inevitable path, right? Probably my most important piece of brain for writing this sort of character, or anyone really, is that our actions are all completely rational and justified in our own heads. So this is what I think of every time I'm writing any character for anything, is this character fully believes in what they're doing, who they are, and that this is the answer to their quandary. This doesn't mean that they are actually being logical in the reality of the situation or the physical world, or that reality is truly formed around them. But to them, the ends justify the means, and they're on their path to solving a problem. When we're making decisions, we believe that our path or decisions make sense to get us to the ultimate goal that we have. And the same should be said and thought of about anti-heroes. So think about the problem of your anti-hero as the same as the problem as the hero has, who needs to stop the spaceship from exploding or everybody dies. The anti-hero's goal is just as desperate as gotta make sure nobody dies, gotta make sure this doesn't explode. They need to accomplish this goal or else their world will implode. And I cannot stress it enough how much a story is helped by having a character have a goal or a need. That's the thing that's pushing them forward, an identifiable thing to fill. And it doesn't have to be, I have to go get this chalice. It doesn't have to be, I have this big long mission. Going back to my current work in progress, the main character Abel's desperate desire is he has to solve the loneliness. He has to stop getting rejected. He has to figure out a way to create community with other people, because the isolation and the rejection is making him go crazy. And he's got to solve it. But he doesn't have anybody to ask because he's so isolated. So what do you do when you're in a situation where you don't know who to ask how to solve your problem, and your problem is you don't have anybody to talk to? So then you become helpless. And from there, you figure out how that person's mind works in order to fix that problem. And it's not necessarily rational. In Jeffrey Dahmer's case, he thought that the dead bodies couldn't leave him. He couldn't be rejected by somebody who was dead. He couldn't be walked out on by somebody who was dead. And so that was the solution to his problem. It made sense until, he had to dismember them and get rid of them. And then for some reason, his brain said, you know what? These people will never leave us if we eat them. They'll continue to be a part of us forever. And so he ate them. And is that rational at all? No. Not in the real world. But if your brain says, this is the goal, this is how we solve this, and so my only ability is to try and see if this fixes the problem, that's what you're going to do. So consider that when you're working on your anti-hero. A lot of the time, if we're thinking of a typical revenge scheme, they go, my pain is going to go away, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to feel justified, I'm going to feel like the world is all correct when this person is dead. And so that's what pushes them. However, anybody who is mentally healthy might be like, killing somebody is not going to help you feel better. And, when they get to the end, they either are crazy killers or they realize that that didn't actually fix the problem and they're worse off than they were before, or some other variation. But the decision at the time makes sense until they try it and it doesn't work. So consider that with your anti-hero. If you have any suggestions for dealing with anti-heroes, if you've written anti-heroes, or if you have thoughts on this content, please let me know in the comments down below. If you have any subject that you would like me to cover, also let me know in the comments down below. I hope you liked this. If you did, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. We are currently reading Animal Farm on Mondays, so get ready for chapter 2 coming Monday. And until next time, see you later, and don't die.